The great hall of Arendor had never witnessed such silence. Seren pressed her spine against the cold marble pillar, her breath shallow, her pulse a wild drumbeat that threatened to betray her hiding place. From the eastern gallery where servants were forbidden to stand, she watched the ceremony unfold below like a nightmare taking form. 10,000 candles. That was what the kitchen maids had whispered while preparing the feast. 10,000 flames to illuminate the moment their Alpha King would choose his queen. She should not have come. Every instinct, every whisper of self-preservation screamed at her to retreat to the cramped chamber she shared with the other healers. To wait, as Calder had instructed, for him to come to her after the formalities concluded. The council demands a public display, he had told her 3 nights ago, his fingers tracing the mark he had left on the curve of her hip. They need to see me consider their candidates before I reject them all. It means nothing, Seren. You are my mate. My only mate. When dawn breaks, I will announce you to the realm, and no power in this world will separate us. She had believed him. She had believed every word that fell from those lips, every promise whispered in the sacred darkness of the forest where they had first discovered the bond that sang between their souls. For 8 months, she had been his secret, his forbidden truth. The common-born healer with no family name who had somehow captured the heart of the most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms. Now she stood in shadows, watching him prepare to choose another. The candidates ascended the dais in a river of white silk and ancient bloodlines. 7 daughters of the great houses, each one groomed from birth for this possibility. Seren recognized them all from her months of quiet observation. Lady Rowena of the Eastern Shores, with her warriors bearing. The twin sisters from House Blackmere, whose family controlled the mountain passes. The pale beauty from the Southern Isles whose dowry could fund an army. And at their center, moving with the liquid grace of a predator, walked Ravenna Marek. The crowd's murmur of approval slithered through the hall like a living thing. House Marek held the northern territories, commanded 4,000 swords, and had been positioning their eldest daughter for this moment since before Seren was born. Ravenna's hair fell in waves of deepest auburn. Her eyes, the color of frozen amber, swept across the assembly with naked ambition. Those eyes found Seren's hiding place for one fleeting heartbeat. And Ravenna smiled. Seren's blood turned to winter. She tore her gaze away, forcing herself to look at Calder. Her Calder, who stood on the raised platform in ceremonial black, his powerful frame rigid beneath the weight of his ancestors' mantle. From this distance, she could trace the familiar lines of his face. The strong jaw she had kissed 100 times, the dark hair that fell across his brow that she had brushed back with tender fingers. The shoulders that had sheltered her from nightmares and promised her forever. But something was wrong. Seren leaned forward, her nails biting crescents into her palms. Calder stood too still, not the coiled readiness of a predator, but the emptiness of a statue carved from flesh. His movements as the High Elder spoke, the ritual words were mechanical, puppet-like, as if strings she could not see guided his limbs, and his eyes. Those amber eyes that had blazed with fierce devotion when he looked upon her, that had softened to honey when he spoke her name, that had burned with barely restrained passion when he claimed her beneath the winter moon. They were flat, dull, empty as a house long abandoned. Calder, Alpha King of Arendor, blood of the first pack, chosen of the moon, the High Elder intoned. The council has presented the daughters of our noble houses. The realm awaits your choice. The silence stretched until Seren could hear her own heartbeat echoing off the ancient stones. Surely now, surely he would turn, would find her in the crowd, would declare that no candidate could compare to the mate fate itself had chosen for him. Calder stepped forward. I choose. His voice rang out, hollow as an empty grave, Ravenna of House Marek. The world shattered. Seren could not breathe, could not move, could only watch in frozen horror as cheers erupted through the great hall, as wolves howled their approval, as nobles embraced and warriors stamped their feet in celebration of the alliance that would reshape their world. And on the dais, Calder raised Ravenna's pale hand to his lips. The mark on Seren's hip exploded with agony. She doubled over, a cry strangling in her throat as fire tore through the flesh where his teeth had claimed her. The pain was beyond anything she had experienced, beyond the burning of the original bite, beyond the sweet ache that pulsed when they were apart. This was destruction, annihilation, as if the bond itself was being ripped from her body. Through vision blurred with tears, she watched Ravenna smile in triumph, watched Calder show nothing at all. He did not search for her, did not hesitate, did not seem to remember that she existed. A sob escaped Seren's throat, lost in the cacophony of celebration. She stumbled backward, one hand pressed to her burning mark, the other wrapped around her belly. The belly where his child had taken root. The secret she had planned to tell him tonight, after the farce concluded, after he came to her, as he always did. The words she had practiced 1,000 times, imagining the joy that would transform his face, the way his hands would tremble as they touched the place where their love had created new life. Now those words turned to ash in her mouth. Serene ran. The servants' passages were empty, every soul in the castle having gathered to witness history. She fled through them blind, gasping, her body screaming with a pain that went deeper than flesh. The mark pulsed with each heartbeat, a wound that would not stop bleeding. She reached her tiny chamber and began to pack, with fingers that would not stop shaking. A spare dress, her mother's ring, the only inheritance she possessed, the herbs she had gathered for the sickness that plagued her mornings. At the window, she paused. Celebration fires were blooming across the capital. Somewhere in the great hall, Calder was accepting congratulations for his wise choice. Ravenna was already being fitted with a crown, and no one knew. No one suspected that the Alpha King's true mate was vanishing into the night with his heir growing beneath her heart. Seren pressed her palm to the frosted glass. "I loved you," she whispered to the distant flames. "I would have given you everything." Then she pulled her hood over her face and slipped through the servants' gate, swallowed by the frozen darkness beyond the walls. She did not see the shadow that separated from the tower above. She did not see the amber eyes that flickered just for an instant with desperate recognition. And she did not hear the howl that split the sky 3 heartbeats later, a sound of such raw anguish that wolves across the kingdom stopped mid-stride and lifted their heads in shared torment. By the time the darkness cleared from Calder's mind, Seren's chamber held nothing but cold air and the ghost of her scent. She was already gone. 5 days. 5 days since she had fled the only home she had known. 5 days since the man she loved had chosen another without a flicker of recognition in his empty eyes. 5 days, and Seren was dying. She had found shelter in an abandoned hunter's cabin 3 leagues from the nearest village, deep in the thornwood where few travelers ventured. The roof leaked in 2 places. The hearthstones were cracked. Wind crept through gaps in the warped wooden walls. None of that mattered. What mattered was hiding. What mattered was surviving long enough to bring her child into the world. But her body was failing. Seren lay curled on the straw pallet, her cloak wrapped tight around her trembling frame, watching dawnlight creep through the gaps in the shutters. She had not been able to keep food down in 2 days. Her limbs felt weighted with stones. Every breath required effort that left her exhausted. And the mark was spreading. She had examined it that morning, pulling aside her dress with fingers that shook. What had once been a perfect impression of teeth, silver-scarred and beautiful, had become something else entirely. The edges had darkened to the purple-black of a deep bruise. Tendrils of discoloration spread outward across her hip like cracks in shattered ice, reaching toward her belly, her spine, her heart. The bond was dying, and it was taking her with it. Serene had heard the old stories, the ones healers whispered to each other in the quiet hours between emergencies. True mates were rare, perhaps one pair in a generation. When such a bond was forged and then severed, the consequences were catastrophic. For ordinary wolves, rejection meant pain, grief, a slow healing that might take months or years. For true mates, rejection meant death. The bond could not be broken without destroying the souls it connected. When one true mate rejected another, the abandoned half began to fade. Their wolf retreated inward, devouring the body from within. Most did not survive beyond a fortnight. Serene had perhaps a week left, perhaps less. She pressed her palm to the swell of her belly, where the only warmth in her body seemed to concentrate. "I am trying," she whispered to the life growing inside her. "I am fighting, but I do not know how to win against this." The baby stirred, a flutter of movement that brought tears to Serene's eyes. At least one of them still possessed strength. She had considered, in the darkest hours of the night, what would happen to her child if she did not survive. Would the baby fade with her, their lives too intertwined to separate? Or would some miracle preserve the tiny soul even as its mother crumbled to dust? There would be no one to raise it, no family to take it in. She had been an orphan herself, raised by the Healers Guild after her parents perished in the plague that swept through the eastern villages. If she died here, alone and unmourned, her child would face the same fate, if the child survived at all. A coughing fit seized her, and Serene curled tighter around herself as her body shook. When it passed, she tasted copper on her tongue. Blood. The fading had reached her lungs. She needed to move, needed water at least, even if she could not keep down food. The stream was perhaps 50 paces from the cabin door. She had managed the distance yesterday. Surely she could manage it again. Serene pushed herself upright, and the world tilted violently. She caught herself on the edge of the pallet, gasping, waiting for the spinning to subside. When she finally trusted her legs to hold her, she rose inch by careful inch. The cabin door seemed impossibly far away. She made it 3 steps before her knees buckled. The packed earth floor rushed up to meet her, and Serene barely got her hands beneath her before she collapsed entirely. She knelt there, shaking, her hair falling around her face like a curtain, her breath coming in harsh gasps. This was how she would die, not in battle, not surrounded by those who loved her. Alone in an abandoned cabin, too weak to reach water, carrying the child of a king who had discarded her like refuse. "Please," she breathed, though she did not know who she was begging. The gods who had never answered her prayers? The bond that was killing her? Calder, whose betrayal had set this destruction in motion. "Please, not like this. Not yet." The mark on her hip flared with sudden searing heat. Serene cried out, her hand flying to the wound. But this pain was different from the constant burning ache she had grown accustomed to. This was sharp, urgent, searching. And beneath the pain, impossibly, she felt something. A presence. Distant, but approaching. A consciousness pressing against the edges of her awareness with desperate, clawing need. Her wolf stirred. She had thought her wolf had retreated too deep to reach, curled in the furthest corner of her soul to escape the agony of rejection, but now it lifted its head. Now it reached toward that distant presence with something that felt terrifyingly like recognition, something that felt like hope. "No," Serene whispered. "No, it cannot be." She forced herself to crawl toward the window, every movement sending lightning bolts of pain through her failing body. When she finally reached the wall, she gripped the sill and pulled herself high enough to peer through the gap in the shutters. The thornwood stretched before her, ancient oaks and tangled undergrowth silvered with morning frost. And at the edge of the clearing, emerging from the shadows between the trees, stood 3 massive wolves. their eyes fixed on her cabin with an intelligence that was anything but animal. They had found her. The mark on Seren's hip pulsed with answering heat, and her wolf howled within her chest, a sound of longing and terror intertwined. She slid down the wall as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was the largest wolf beginning to move toward the cabin door. Calder had not slept in 5 days. He stood in the chamber that still smelled of her, his claws extended, his wolf so close to the surface that amber bled permanently into his vision. The bed where they had tangled together so many nights was neatly made. The small collection of herbs on her shelf gathered dust. A single hair ribbon, pale blue, hung from a hook beside the mirror. She had taken almost nothing, had fled with only what she could carry, had fled from him. "My king." Corvin's voice was careful, measured, the voice one used with a feral creature that might attack at any moment. "You need to rest. Your wolf cannot sustain this. My wolf will sustain whatever it must until she is found." The words emerged as a growl, barely human. Calder gripped the edge of her small table, and the wood cracked beneath his fingers. 5 days since he had woken from the darkness to find himself in his chambers with Ravenna Merrick beside him, her hands reaching for the laces of his ceremonial coat. 5 days since horror had flooded through him as he realized what had been done. He remembered nothing of the choosing, nothing of speaking the words that bound him to a woman he despised. One moment he had been raising a cup of wine to his lips, preparing for the farce he had promised Seren would mean nothing. The next, he was waking in a fog of confusion with 3 days missing from his memory, and Seren was gone. "The compound we found in your blood," Corvin continued, maintaining his careful distance. "Our healers have never seen anything like it. Wolfsbane, certainly, but blended with other substances. Nightflower, moonseed, a combination designed to suppress your wolf entirely and leave your conscious mind vulnerable to suggestion. The Merricks. Almost certainly, we have not yet found proof sufficient to." "I do not need proof." Calder turned, and Corvin took an involuntary step backward from whatever he saw in his king's face. "I need Seren. Every moment she remains missing, every hour that passes without her in my arms, I can feel myself slipping further." His wolf surged against his control, and for a terrifying instant Calder felt his grip falter. The beast wanted out. Wanted to tear through the castle walls, to hunt, to find what belonged to them and destroy anything that stood in the way. If he lost control now, he might never come back. "The bond," Calder forced out through gritted teeth. "It screams at me, Corvin. Night and day it screams. But the sound is growing weaker." His beta's expression shifted to something that looked like grief. "My king, if the bond is weakening, it may mean—" "Do not say it." The words were pure wolf, pure threat. "Do not even think it. She is alive. She has to be alive." But the fear that had taken root in his chest grew thornier with each passing hour. The bond between true mates could not be severed without consequence. When he had woken from the drugged haze and reached for Seren through their connection, he had felt her pain, her terror, her devastation. And he had felt her beginning to fade. A knock at the chamber door snapped both wolves to attention. One of the king's scouts entered, his young face pale with exhaustion. "Report," Corvin commanded. "We have tracked her scent to the northern road, my lord. She traveled on foot for approximately 2 leagues before the trail goes cold. But one of our wolves picked up a trace heading toward the thornwood." The thornwood. Dense, ancient, easy to disappear into. "How old is the trail?" Calder demanded. The scout hesitated. 3 days, perhaps 4. The rain has obscured much of the scent." 4 days. She had been alone in that wilderness for 4 days while he tore the castle apart searching for her. While he interrogated servants and threatened nobles and came within a heartbeat of killing Ravenna Merrick with his bare hands before Corvin pulled him back. 4 days while the bond deteriorated, while she faded, while he failed her. "Assemble a hunting party," Calder commanded, already moving toward the door. "We leave within the hour." "My king, you cannot," Corvin began. "Watch me! The council demands your presence. The Merricks are threatening withdrawal of their troops from the border if you do not honor the choosing. The other houses are whispering of instability. If you leave now—" Calder spun, and his wolf bled fully into his eyes. "Let them whisper. Let them threaten. Let the entire realm burn to cinders if that is what it takes." He advanced on Corvin until they stood nose to nose. "That woman carries my mark, my child, my entire reason for drawing breath. If you think anything in this world, any alliance or treaty or political consideration, matters more to me than finding her, then you do not know me at all." Corvin held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "The hunting party will be ready in half an hour, my king." They entered the thornwood as the sun reached its peak. 20 wolves in total, Calder's most trusted trackers and warriors, spread in a wide formation that swept through the undergrowth like a silent tide. Calder ran at their center in his wolf form, a massive beast of midnight black, whose paws tore gouges in the frozen earth. The bond guided him, even weakened, even screaming with pain he did not understand. It pulled him northeast with an urgency that bordered on compulsion. She was close, closer with every stride, and she was dying. He could feel it now with terrible clarity, the bond fraying like a rope stretched too thin. Her life force flickering like a candle in a storm. Whatever was happening to her, it was accelerating. Calder pushed himself faster. The trees thinned ahead, suggesting a clearing. One of his scouts looped back, thoughts pressing against Calder's mind with urgent images. A cabin. Small. Abandoned. And inside, the faintest trace of the scent they had been tracking for 5 desperate days. Calder shifted mid-stride, exploding into human form as he crashed through the final barrier of undergrowth. The clearing held a hunter's cabin, decrepit and barely standing. But smoke wisped from the crumbling chimney, and the door stood slightly ajar. "Seren!" Her name tore from his throat as he sprinted toward the cabin. "Seren!" He hit the door with his shoulder, splintering it inward, and stumbled into the dim interior. For one endless moment, his mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. She lay crumpled on the floor beside the window, her body curled around her belly like a shield. Her skin had gone gray, waxy, stretched too tight over bones that seemed sharper than he remembered. Her breathing was shallow, rattling, barely there at all. And the mark on her hip, visible where her dress had torn in her fall, was black as coal and spreading. She was dying. She was dying. And it was his fault. Something inside Calder shattered. His wolf surged forward with a roar that was pure anguish, pure madness. And for the first time in his life, the Alpha King of Arendor lost control entirely. The wolf that erupted from Calder's skin was not the creature his pack knew. This was something older. Something feral and savage and utterly beyond reason. His fur bristled with supernatural charge. His eyes blazed not amber but molten gold, burning with a light that had not been seen in Arendor for 5 generations. The primal wolf, the beast that lurked beneath the civilized veneer of every alpha, waiting for the moment when something precious enough was threatened. Corvin burst through the ruined doorway behind him and immediately dropped to his belly, whimpering. The other wolves who had followed crowded at the threshold, unable to enter, unable to approach the maelstrom of power that radiated from their king. Calder did not notice them. He prowled toward Seren's crumpled form, each step shaking the floorboards, a sound building in his chest that was part growl, part howl, part keen of absolute despair. His massive head lowered until his muzzle nearly touched her ashen face. She did not stir. The scent of her filled his nostrils, but it was wrong. Beneath the familiar notes of lavender and morning rain lurked something acrid, something rotting, the smell of a bond consuming itself, devouring the body it was meant to protect. The smell of death, reaching for what belonged to him. A roar tore from Calder's throat, so loud that birds erupted from trees half a league distant. His claws gouged furrows in the wooden floor. His wolf thrashed against the cage of his skull, demanding blood, demanding vengeance, demanding the impossible. Fix her. Save her. Kill whoever did this. But there was no enemy here to destroy. Only the consequences of what had been done to him. Only the woman he loved, dying because he had failed to protect her from his own stolen voice. Calder shifted back to human form, the transformation violent and graceless. He gathered Seren into his arms with hands that would not stop shaking, cradling her against his chest as if he could pour his own life into her failing body. Seren. Her name cracked in his throat. Seren, open your eyes. Look at me. Please, please, look at me. Her lashes fluttered. The barest movement, a whisper of response. That is it. Calder pressed his forehead to hers, his tears falling onto her colorless cheeks. Stay with me. You have to stay with me. I cannot do this without you. Her lips moved, shaping a word he could not hear. He bent closer, his ear nearly touching her mouth. Chose her. The whisper was barely breath, but it struck him like a blade between the ribs. No. The word came out fierce, desperate. I did not choose her. I would never choose anyone but you. Seren. I was drugged. The Merricks poisoned me. I remember nothing of that night. Nothing except waking to find you gone and my world in ruins. But she was past hearing. Her eyes had rolled back, her body going limp in his arms. No! Calder's roar shook dust from the rafters. You do not get to leave me. His wolf surged again, and this time he did not fight it. He let the beast rise, let the primal power flood through his veins, let instinct override everything else. True mates could share life force through their bond. It was dangerous, forbidden except in the most desperate circumstances. A wolf who gave too much of himself would fade alongside his mate. Calder did not hesitate. He pressed his mouth to the blackened mark on her hip and pushed. The sensation was indescribable, like reaching into his own chest and tearing out fistfuls of light. Like bleeding from a wound that had no physical form. Energy poured from him into her, golden and burning, flooding the corrupted channels of their bond. The darkness in her mark fought back. Calder felt it, a cold and hungry thing that had been feeding on her for days. It resisted his intrusion, coiling tighter around her fading spark, refusing to release its prey. He pushed harder, his vision grayed at the edges. His heartbeat stuttered. Somewhere far away he heard Corvin shouting, felt hands trying to pull him back. He snarled without releasing her, his teeth pressing deeper into the mark, his entire being focused on the single imperative that consumed him. Live. You will live. I will not allow anything else. The darkness shattered. Calder felt it give way like ice cracking beneath spring thaw, felt the corruption recede as his life force flooded through Seren's failing body. Color rushed back into her cheeks, her breathing deepened. Her heartbeat, which had grown so faint he could barely detect it, surged with renewed strength. And the bond, the screaming, fraying connection between them, blazed back to life with an intensity that stole his breath. He released her mark and collapsed beside her, utterly spent. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Seren's eyes opened. They were clear, aware, and filled with a confusion that slowly crystallized into recognition. Calder? Her voice was hoarse, broken from disuse. How did you? He could not answer, could barely keep his eyes open. The price of what he had done was claiming him now. Exhaustion so profound it felt like drowning. But he managed to lift his hand, to cup her face with trembling fingers. Found you, he breathed. Will always find you. Then the darkness took him, and the Alpha King of Arendor knew nothing more. When Calder woke, he was lying on the straw pallet that smelled overwhelmingly of Seren. Daylight had shifted to the amber glow of late afternoon, and someone was pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. He opened his eyes to find her kneeling beside him. She looked better. Not healed, not entirely, but the gray pallor had faded from her skin and her eyes held life rather than the shadow of death. The mark on her hip, visible through the tear in her dress, was still darkened, but no longer spreading. You are an idiot, Seren said quietly. Calder would have laughed if he had the strength. That is not the greeting I was hoping for. You nearly killed yourself. Her voice cracked on the words. Corvin said you were transferring your life force, that another few moments would have stopped your heart. Worth it. Worth it? Seren's composure shattered. You chose another woman in front of the entire kingdom. You looked right through me like I was nothing. And now you expect me to believe you would die for me? Calder forced himself upright despite his body's screaming protests. His hands found her shoulders, turning her to face him fully. I did not choose her. Each word was deliberate, weighted with everything he possessed. The wine at the ceremony was poisoned. The Merrick slipped something into my cup that severed me from my wolf. I was a puppet, Seren. A mindless body speaking words I would never have uttered. Her eyes searched his face, desperate to believe, terrified to hope. I woke 3 days later with Ravenna trying to consummate a bond I had no memory of agreeing to. The first thing I did was throw her from my chambers. The second was to run to your room. His voice broke. You were already gone. Your scent was fading. And I thought I had lost you forever. A tear slipped down Seren's cheek. I saw your eyes. They were empty, like you did not even know me. Because I was not there. Calder pressed his forehead to hers. My mind was buried so deep, locked away where I could not fight what they were doing to me. But some part of me must have known. When you fled, when the bond stretched to its breaking point, something inside me screamed loud enough to crack the poison's hold. The howl, Seren whispered. I heard a howl as I passed through the gate. That was me, waking into a nightmare I did not understand. Reaching for you and finding only absence. Her hand came up to touch his face, her fingers trembling. I thought you had thrown me away. I thought everything between us was a lie. That I was just a convenient amusement until you were forced to choose someone worthy of your throne. The words gutted him. You are worthy of everything. Calder gripped her hand, pressing it harder against his cheek. You are my mate, Seren. My true mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would sacrifice that for politics? For power? For anything? I wanted to believe, she choked out. Even when I was dying, some part of me kept hoping. Dying. The word brought the horror rushing back. The fading. Seren, why did you not seek help? Why did you hide alone in this place instead of finding someone who could... Who could what? Bitterness crept into her voice. The woman who was publicly rejected by the Alpha King? The nobody servant carrying his illegitimate child? Who would have helped me, Calder? Your noble houses? Your council? Illegitimate child. The words struck him like lightning. The child. His hands moved to her belly before he could stop them, hovering just above the swell he had not let himself examine until now. Seren, the child. Is it still alive? She placed her hand over his, guiding his palm to rest against her. Barely. The fading was taking us both. But somehow, they held on. They. Calder's breath caught. They? I do not know for certain. But the movements come from different places. The midwife, in the last village I passed through, suggested I might be carrying more than one. Twins. He was going to be a father to twins, and he had nearly lost them all. The emotion that crashed through Calder was too large for his chest to contain. He pulled Seren against him, burying his face in her hair, his body shaking with sobs he could not control. "I am sorry," he gasped. "I am so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have. You were drugged. I should have been stronger. Should have fought through it somehow. Should never have let them." Seren silenced him with her lips. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the fierce passion they had shared before, but it said more than words could express. Forgiveness. Acceptance. The first fragile thread of trust beginning to mend. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet but clear. "We cannot undo what happened," she said quietly, "but we can decide what happens next." Before Calder could respond, Corvin's voice cut through the cabin wall. "My king. We have a problem." Calder rose on unsteady legs, his body still weak from the life force he had expended. Seren moved to stand beside him, and he felt her hand slip into his, her fingers intertwining with his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Corvin waited outside the cabin, his expression grim. The other wolves had formed a loose perimeter around the clearing, their attention fixed on the tree line to the south. "Report," Calder commanded. "One of our scouts intercepted a messenger hawk carrying this." Corvin held out a small leather cylinder. "The seal is House Merrick." Calder's blood turned to ice. He took the cylinder and unrolled the parchment inside. The message was brief, written in a cipher he recognized from his years of studying enemy communications. The fating failed. Deploy the thorn claws. Ensure no survivors. The succession must not be compromised. Seren read over his shoulder, her grip on his hand tightening. "They knew," she whispered. "They knew the rejection would kill me. They were counting on it. And when it did not work fast enough, they sent killers to finish what the fating started." Calder crumpled the parchment in his fist. "How far out are they?" "The message was dated yesterday," Corvin replied. "If they departed immediately, they could reach us by nightfall. Perhaps sooner." "The Thorn Claws." Seren's voice was hollow. "I have heard that name. They are assassins. The best House Merrick commands." "They are ghosts," Corvin corrected grimly. "Wolves trained from childhood to hunt and kill without mercy. They have never failed an assignment." "Then we leave now," Calder decided. "We can outrun them if we move immediately." "My king, you can barely stand, and the lady is in no condition to travel." "Then carry us. I do not care how we move, only that we move." But Seren was shaking her head. "Running will not solve this." Her voice was quiet but firm. "They will keep coming. As long as I am alive, as long as I carry your heirs, the Merricks will never stop hunting me." "Then I will destroy them." Calder's eyes blazed. "I will tear House Merrick from the foundations and salt the earth where they stood." "You cannot wage war on a noble house without proof of their treachery. Your own council would turn against you. The other houses would see it as tyranny and unite in opposition." She was right. He knew she was right. But the wolf in him cared nothing for politics, only for protecting what belonged to him. "There must be something we can do," he growled. "There is." Seren met his gaze with an intensity that surprised him. "We stop running. We face them here. And we make sure someone survives to testify to what House Merrick has done." "You want to fight assassins while pregnant and barely recovered from dying?" "I want to stop being a victim." Fire kindled in her eyes, a flame he had not seen since before the choosing. "I have spent my entire life being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed as a nobody with no family and no power. I will not spend what remains of it cowering in shadows while others decide my fate." Calder stared at her. This was not the gentle healer he had fallen in love with. This was something else. Something fiercer. And he realized with a start that he had never truly known all of her. Seren? He took her face in his hands. What are you not telling me? She was silent for a long moment. My mother did not die of plague, she finally said. She died because she revealed what she was. What I am. The clearing seemed to grow colder. My family has carried a bloodline gift for generations. We kept it hidden because those who possess it have historically been hunted, imprisoned, used as weapons by those in power. Seren's jaw tightened. My mother made the mistake of healing a dying lord's son when no other healer could save him. She revealed too much. Within a month, she was dead, and I was an orphan being raised by the guild. What gift? Calder asked softly. Seren extended her hand, palm up. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then shadows began to gather in her palm. They swirled like living darkness, coiling around her fingers, pulsing with a light that was somehow black. They call it the void touch, Seren whispered. The ability to channel the space between life and death. To heal wounds that should be fatal. To kill with a touch that stops the heart. I have spent my entire life suppressing it, using only the smallest fraction of the gift to work as a healer without drawing attention. Calder watched the shadows dance across her skin. Why did you never tell me? Because I was afraid. She closed her fist, and the darkness dissipated. Afraid you would see me as a monster. Afraid you would want to use me as a weapon. Afraid that if anyone discovered what I truly was, I would end up like my mother. Seren. Calder pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her. You could never be a monster, and I would never use you. I love you, all of you, including the parts you have been afraid to show. She trembled in his embrace. The fading should have killed me, she whispered against his shoulder. The void touch is the only reason I survived as long as I did. It fed on the darkness of the dying bond, converted it into something I could endure. But if I use it fully, if I unleash what I have been suppressing my entire life, I do not know what will happen. Then we will face that uncertainty together. He pulled back to look into her eyes. You are not alone anymore, Seren. Whatever comes, whatever you become, I will be beside you. My mate, my queen, my equal in all things. I am not a queen, she protested weakly. I am a servant girl with dangerous magic and no family name. You are the mother of my children. Calder's voice was fierce. You are the woman who holds my heart, and when we return to Arendor, you will stand beside me on that throne, and anyone who objects can take their complaints directly to my wolf. A sound escaped Seren that was half laugh, half sob. You are impossible. I am in love. Same thing. Corvin cleared his throat from the edge of the clearing. Forgive the interruption, but I believe we have company. Calder spun, instinctively pushing Seren behind him. Through the trees to the south, shapes were moving. Silent, coordinated, advancing with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. How many? Calder demanded. 12 that I can see. There may be more circling to cut off escape routes. 12 elite assassins against 20 wolves, most of whom were scouts and trackers rather than fighters. With a king weakened by life force transfer and a pregnant mate who had been dying hours ago. The odds were not in their favor. Fall back to the cabin, Calder ordered. Defensive formation. No one gets through to Seren. Calder. Seren gripped his arm. Let me help. Absolutely not. You can barely stand. I stood against the fading for 5 days. I can stand against this. Her eyes blazed with dark fire. These wolves are coming to murder your children. Our children. I will not hide while others fight my battles. Before Calder could argue, a howl split the air. The Thornclaws had arrived. They emerged from the forest like nightmares taking form. 12 wolves with fur the color of ash and shadow, their eyes gleaming with predatory focus. They moved in perfect synchronization, spreading to encircle the cabin with the precision of a military formation. And at their center, walking upright in human form, strode the commander of the Thornclaws himself. Seren did not recognize the scarred warrior, but Corvin's sharp intake of breath told her everything she needed to know. Draven Holt, the beta murmured. Lord Merrick's personal executioner, they sent their best. Draven was a monster of a man, his face a ruin of old battle wounds, his eyes flat and pitiless as a serpent's. He surveyed the clearing with the casual confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. "Alpha King Calder," he called out, his voice carrying across the frozen ground. "House Merrick sends its regards. Surrender the woman and your death will be quick. Resist, and we will make you watch, while we tear her apart, piece by piece." "House Merrick can rot in the deepest hell," Calder snarled. "You will not touch her." Bold words from a king who can barely stand. Draven smiled, and the expression was terrible. "We know about the life force transfer. You are weakened, your wolves are outnumbered, and your pregnant whore cannot run far enough to matter." Calder's wolves formed a protective circle around the cabin, hackles raised, growls building in their throats. But they were outnumbered, and everyone present knew it. "Last chance," Draven said. "Give us the woman." Calder's answer was a roar that shook the trees. The battle erupted. Wolves clashed in a chaos of fur and fang. Draven's assassins fought with brutal efficiency, their movements coordinated, and their attacks designed to overwhelm and separate. Calder tore into the nearest Thornclaw, his weakened state no match for his fury. Seren hung back as the wolves fought, her focus on finding an opening, a way to help without becoming a liability. The silver knife Corvin had pressed into her hand felt pitifully small against the predators surrounding them. Then she saw what she had feared. 3 Thornclaws had broken from the main fight. They were circling wide, using the chaos as cover, moving to flank the cabin, moving to reach her while Calder was occupied. Seren backed toward the cabin wall, her heart pounding. The wolves approached in perfect formation, their amber eyes fixed on her with cold intent. The first Thornclaw lunged. Seren dove aside, barely avoiding jaws that snapped shut inches from her throat. She slashed with the knife, felt it catch flesh, and heard a yelp of pain. But the second wolf was already on her. Its weight drove her to the ground, claws raking across her shoulder. Seren screamed as fire exploded through her arm. The knife flew from her grip, spinning away across the frozen earth. The wolf's muzzle descended toward her throat, and something inside Seren finally broke free. The shadows that she had suppressed for 23 years erupted from her skin like a living storm. The Thornclaw above her was flung backward, its fur smoking where the darkness touched it. It hit the ground howling, writhing, and its body convulsing as the void touch fed on the life force within. Seren rose to her feet, and she was no longer the frightened healer who had fled into the night. Darkness coiled around her arms like serpents. It pooled at her feet like spilled ink. Her eyes, when she blinked, had become pits of absolute black. The third Thornclaw hesitated. That hesitation cost it everything. Seren extended her hand, and a tendril of shadow shot forward, piercing the wolf's chest. It did not even have time to whimper before it collapsed, its life force drained in the span of a single heartbeat. Across the clearing, the battle stuttered to a halt. Every wolf, friend and enemy alike, turned to stare at the pregnant woman who stood wreathed in living darkness, 2 elite assassins dead at her feet. Draven's scarred face had gone pale. "What are you?" he breathed. Seren turned to face him, and the shadows around her pulsed with hunger. I am the woman your masters tried to murder." Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with the darkness itself. "I am the mate they tried to steal. I am the mother of the heirs they would have slaughtered in the womb." She took a step forward, and the ground beneath her feet blackened as if burned. "And I am done being afraid. Draven stumbled backward, his composure shattered. "Kill her!" he roared at his remaining wolves. "Kill her now!" But the Thornclaws did not move. They were staring at Seren with something she had never expected to see in the eyes of trained assassins. Fear. Calder appeared at Seren's side, his wolf form giving way to the man, his hand closing around hers. The touch grounded her, pulled her back from the edge of something vast and terrifying. "Stand down," he commanded the assassins. "Your employer has sent you on a fool's errand. You can die for House Merrick's crimes, or you can walk away. Choose." The Thornclaws exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they melted back into the forest, leaving their dead behind. Draven's scream of fury echoed through the trees. "Cowards! Traitors! Lord Merrick will have your heads for—" Corvin's jaws closed around his arm, silencing his threats with a yelp of pain. Within moments, the commander was bound and gagged, his ruined face contorted with impotent rage. Seren felt the shadows beginning to recede, the power sinking back beneath her skin. Exhaustion crashed over her in waves, and she would have fallen if Calder had not caught her. "I have you," he murmured against her hair. "I have you." "The power," she gasped. "I could not control it. It wanted to keep feeding. It wanted—" "But you stopped it. You pulled back." "Barely." Calder turned her face up to his. "You saved yourself. You saved our children. You defeated assassins that have never known failure." His eyes blazed with fierce pride. "You are magnificent, Seren." She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she had been terrified, that the power had felt like drowning in darkness, that she had no idea how to wield it safely. But Corvin's voice interrupted before she could speak. "My king, we found something on the commander." He held up a scroll, its seal already broken. "Orders from House Merrick to their allies in Arendor. They have been planning this for months." Corvin's expression was grim. "And they have already begun the next phase. While we have been hunting for Seren, the Merricks have been positioning their forces." Calder took the scroll and read its contents. When he looked up, his face had turned to stone. "They are moving on the capital," he said flatly. "They intend to seize the throne while I am away." "How long?" Seren demanded. "The attack begins at moonrise." Calder looked toward the horizon, where the sun was already beginning its descent. "We have perhaps 4 hours to reach Arendor before my kingdom falls." The journey to Arendor should have taken 2 days. Calder's wolves made it in 6 hours. They ran as they had never run before, pushing beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, driven by the knowledge that everything they loved hung in the balance. Seren rode on Calder's back in his wolf form, her fingers buried in his midnight fur, her body pressed low against his spine as the forest blurred past. She should have been terrified, should have been overwhelmed by the speed, the danger, and the impossible stakes that awaited them. Instead, she felt strangely calm. The bond between her and Calder had strengthened since his desperate intervention in the cabin. She could feel his emotions bleeding through the connection now, a constant current of determination and fury and fierce, protective love. And beneath all of that, threading through everything like gold through dark stone, was his absolute certainty that they would survive this, that they would survive anything, as long as they faced it together. When they stopped briefly to water the wolves at a forest stream, Calder shifted back to human form and pulled her into his arms without a word. "I can feel your fear," he murmured against her hair, "but I can also feel your strength. You are remarkable, Seren." "I am terrified," she admitted. "So am I." He pulled back to meet her eyes. "I have spent 5 days believing I had lost you forever. I have watched you nearly die in my arms. I have seen you unleash power that should be impossible. And through all of it, I have never stopped being afraid. You hide it well. I am an alpha. Hiding fear is half of what we do." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The other half is pretending we know what we are doing. Despite everything, Saren laughed. It was a small sound, fragile and brief. But Calder's expression transformed at hearing it, something wounded and desperate easing in his eyes. "I have missed that sound," he said softly. "I have missed everything about you. Your laugh, your voice, the way you bite your lip when you are thinking, the way you smell like lavender and rain. Calder, let me say this." He took her face in his hands. "I do not know what waits for us in Arendor. I do not know if we will survive the next few hours. But I need you to know, before we face whatever comes, that you are my soul, my North Star, my reason for breathing." Tears pricked at Seren's eyes. "I thought I would never hear you say those things again," she whispered. "When I fled the capital, I was certain that everything between us had been a beautiful lie, that the man I loved had never truly existed." "He exists." Calder pressed his forehead to hers. "He has always existed. He simply lost his way for a moment, through no fault of his own. But he is here now. And he will spend every remaining moment of his life proving himself worthy of the woman who waited for him. You do not need to prove anything." "Perhaps not, but I want to." He kissed her then, soft and tender and full of promise. "When this is over, when the Mareks have been destroyed and our kingdom is secure, I am going to make you my queen in front of every wolf in the realm. I am going to complete our bond properly, with ceremony and witnesses, and every ritual our ancestors used to honor true mates." "And if I do not want ceremony?" Seren asked. "If I just want you?" Calder's smile turned wolfish. "Then you shall have me, every way you desire, for as long as we both draw breath." A howl from Corvin interrupted the moment, calling them back to the desperate race against time. But as Seren climbed once more onto Calder's back, she carried the warmth of his words with her like armor. They would survive this. They had to. The sun was touching the horizon when they crested the final ridge and looked down upon Arendor. Seren's breath caught in her throat. Smoke rose from a dozen points within the capital. The clash of steel and the howls of fighting wolves echoed even from this distance, and flying above the castle gates, where the royal banner should have proclaimed Calder's sovereignty, was the silver serpent of House Merrick. "No," Calder breathed. "They were supposed to attack at moonrise. We should have had more time." "The message was a deception," Corvin said grimly, coming to stand beside them. "They knew we would intercept it. Knew we would push ourselves to arrive before the stated time. They wanted us exhausted and off balance when we reached the city. How many forces do they have inside the walls? Unknown. But our scouts report that fighting has been ongoing for hours. The castle guard held initially, but they were overwhelmed when Marek reinforcements arrived through the eastern gate." "Traitors within the guard," Seren realized. "Just like before. House Merrick has been planning this for 15 years, Calder said bitterly. "They have had time to plant loyalists everywhere." "Then what do we do?" Calder was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the burning city below. "We cannot assault the gates directly. We are too few, and our wolves are exhausted from the journey." His jaw tightened. "But there is another way into the castle, a passage known only to the royal bloodline." "The catacombs," Corvin said. "My king, that path is dangerous even under normal circumstances. In the dark, with enemy forces potentially. Do you have a better suggestion?" The beta fell silent. Calder turned to Seren, his expression torn. "I cannot ask you to come with us. The passage is narrow, treacherous. If something goes wrong, if you think I am staying behind while you walk into danger, you have learned nothing about me." Seren met his gaze without flinching. "We face this together, Calder. That is what you promised." For a moment she thought he would argue. Then he nodded, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "Together," he agreed. always. They descended toward the city as the last light of day faded from the sky. And in the castle above, wolves were dying for a throne that had already been stolen. The catacombs beneath Arendor were older than the kingdom itself. Seren moved through the darkness with one hand on the cold stone wall, the other pressed protectively to her belly. The passage was narrow enough that they could only travel single file, Calder leading, Corvin bringing up the rear, with 6 of their remaining wolves squeezed between. The rest had been sent to create a diversion at the main gates, drawing Marek attention away from the secret entrance. "Watch your step here," Calder murmured, his voice barely audible. The floor drops away suddenly. Seren felt the change beneath her feet and adjusted her stride. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyes like a physical weight. Only the bond with Calder kept her oriented, his presence a beacon she could follow, even blind. "How much further?" she whispered. "The passage opens into the lower dungeons. From there, we can reach the Great Hall through the servants' corridors." He paused, assuming the Merricks have not discovered this entrance. "And if they have?" Calder did not answer. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, though it could not have been more than 30 minutes. The air grew warmer as they ascended, the smell of smoke and blood seeping through the ancient stones. Finally, a glimmer of torchlight appeared ahead. Calder raised his hand, signaling a halt. He crept forward alone, his movements silent despite his size. When he returned, his face was grim. "The dungeons are occupied. At least 20 Merrick wolves guarding the cells." "Guarding what?" Seren asked. "Prisoners. I could see them through the bars." His voice hardened. "The servants who remained loyal to me, the guards who refused to bend the knee. They have been gathered for execution." Seren's heart clenched. "How many?" "Dozens. Perhaps 40. Calder's hands curled into fists. "And among them, I saw Mirren." The name struck Seren like a physical blow. Mirren. The elderly cook who had snuck her extra portions when the other servants looked away. Who had noticed her morning sickness before anyone else and pressed ginger tea into her hands with knowing eyes. Who had helped her pack her meager belongings the night she fled, asking no questions, offering only silent support. "We have to save them," Seren said immediately. "We are 8 wolves against 20. The odds." "I do not care about odds." She gripped his arm. "Those people are prisoners because they were loyal to you, because they refused to serve the family that tried to murder me. I will not let them die for that loyalty." Calder searched her face in the dim light. "You would risk everything for servants you barely know?" "I would risk everything for people who showed me kindness when I had nothing else." Seren's voice was fierce. "Is that not what you would do?" Something shifted in Calder's expression. Pride mixed with something deeper. "Yes," he said quietly. "That is exactly what I would do." He turned to Corvin. "Can we create enough chaos to free the prisoners while maintaining our route to the Great Hall?" The beta considered. "If we strike fast enough, before they can raise an alarm. But it will cost us the element of surprise." "Then we make it count." The attack was swift and savage. Calder burst through the dungeon entrance in full wolf form, his roar shaking the stone walls. The Merrick guards scrambled to respond, but they had grown complacent, confident that no threat could reach them in the heart of their stolen castle. They were wrong. Seren hung back as the wolves clashed, her focus on the prisoners huddled in the cells. The locks were heavy iron, designed to resist supernatural strength, but they were not designed to resist the void touch. She pressed her hands against the first lock and let the darkness flow. The metal corroded in seconds, crumbling to rust beneath her fingers. The door swung open, and the prisoners stared at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Run," she commanded. "The eastern passage leads out of the castle. Go now, while the guards are occupied." They did not need to be told twice. Seren moved from cell to cell, her power consuming lock after lock. She was dimly aware of the battle raging behind her, of Calder's wolves fighting with desperate ferocity, but her attention remained fixed on her task. Free them, save them, make this mean something. She reached Mirren's cell last. The old cook was huddled in the corner, her face bruised and her spirit unbroken. When she saw Seren, her eyes filled with tears. "Child," Mirren breathed. "You came back." "I was always going to come back." Seren dissolved the lock and pulled the door open. "Now go. Find the others. Get to safety." But Mirren caught her hand. "Lord Merrick is in the Great Hall," she said urgently. "He has declared himself regent, but he is not alone. He has hostages, my lady. Important ones." "Who?" "The children." Mirren's voice cracked. "The pups from the royal nursery, the orphans of wolves who fell defending the castle. A dozen little ones held at sword point to ensure compliance." Seren's blood turned to ice. Children. They were using children as shields. She released Mirren and turned to find Calder. The battle had ended. The Merrick guards either dead or fled. But the victory felt hollow in the face of what Mirren had revealed. "Calder." Her voice shook. "We have a problem." When she told him, she watched the color drain from his face. "Children," he repeated. "They would threaten children. They have already tried to murder unborn babies." Seren placed her hand on her belly. "Why would they hesitate at threatening those already born? Then we cannot storm the Great Hall. Any direct assault could result in—" He could not finish the sentence. "There may be another way." Seren's mind was racing. "If I go alone, offer myself in exchange for the children." "Absolutely not." "Calder, listen to me. Lord Merrick wants me dead, but he also wants to justify his coup. If I offer myself publicly, if I walk into that hall and force him to deal with me directly, it buys time. It creates a distraction, and it gives you the opportunity to reach the children while everyone is focused on me. You would be offering yourself to slaughter. I would be offering myself to save innocent lives." She met his gaze without flinching. "Is that not what a queen would do?" Calder stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. "I cannot lose you again," he whispered. "I will not survive it." "You will not lose me." Seren took his face in her hands. "I am done being the victim, Calder. I am done running and hiding and letting others decide my fate. If I am to be your queen, then let me act like one. Let me show our people that I am worthy of standing beside you. You have nothing to prove. Perhaps not to you, but I have everything to prove to myself." She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into the contact. Love, faith, and beneath it all, a fierce determination that would not be swayed. When she pulled back, Calder's eyes were wet. "If anything happens to you," he said hoarsely, "I will tear this kingdom apart, stone by stone." "Then make sure nothing happens to me." Seren smiled, and the expression held an edge that surprised them both. "Save those children. And when I give the signal, bring the wrath of every wolf in Arendor down upon the Merricks." She turned and walked toward the great hall before he could argue further. The doors loomed before her, massive and ancient, guarded by wolves who wore the silver serpent on their livery. They saw her approaching and raised their weapons, confusion flickering across their faces. "I am Seren," she announced, her voice carrying with surprising strength. "Mate of Alpha King Calder, mother of his heirs, and I demand an audience with the traitor who sits upon my throne." The guards exchanged glances. Then, slowly, the doors swung open, and Seren walked into the heart of her enemy's power. The great hall of Arendor was a tableau of stolen triumph. Lord Aldrich Merrick sat upon the throne that had belonged to Calder's bloodline for 16 generations, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, his weathered face arranged in an expression of satisfied authority. Ravenna stood at his right hand, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, her amber eyes bright with triumph. Guards lined the walls, their weapons drawn, their eyes cold. And in the center of the hall, huddled together like frightened lambs, were the children. Seren counted 11 of them, ranging from barely walking to perhaps 7 or 8 years old. Their faces were streaked with tears, their small bodies trembled with terror. And standing behind them, blades drawn and ready, were 4 Merrick wolves who showed no hesitation about what they had been ordered to do. Well, well. Lord Merrick rose from the stolen throne, his movements deliberate. The servant girl returns. I must admit, I did not expect you to walk so willingly into my grasp. I am not walking into your grasp. Seren kept her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. I am walking into my home. Ravenna laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. Your home? You are a nothing, a commoner who spread her legs for a king and convinced herself it meant something. What it meant, Seren replied calmly, was that your entire family had to resort to poison and assassination to compete with me. That does not speak well of your appeal, Ravenna. The other woman's face contorted with fury. Father, let me kill her now. We do not need her alive. Patience, daughter. Lord Merrick descended from the dais, approaching Seren with measured steps. The girl has value as a hostage. When Calder learns we hold both his mate and these whelps, he will have no choice but to surrender. Calder will never surrender to you. Then Calder will watch everyone he loves die. Lord Merrick stopped before her, his eyes cold as winter stone. Starting with the children. He gestured, and one of the guards grabbed the smallest child, a boy of perhaps 3 years, lifting him by the collar of his shirt. The boy wailed in terror. No! Seren lunged forward, but hands seized her arms, holding her in place. Please. He is just a child. They are all just children. Then convince your mate to stand down. Lord Merrick's voice was pitiless. You have until I count to 10. I cannot. 1. Please. Just listen. 2. The boy's screams echoed off the ancient stones. The other children sobbed and clung to each other. 3. Seren's heart was shattering. She could feel Calder through the bond, his anguish and rage as he listened from whatever hiding place he had found. She could feel him preparing to attack, to reveal himself despite the impossible odds. He would die trying to save them. They would all die. Unless she did something. 4. The void touch stirred within her. 5. It rose like a tide, responding to her desperation, to the threat against the innocent, to the darkness of this moment. 6. Seren stopped fighting against it. 7. She let it come. The shadows erupted from her body with a force that threw her captors across the hall. Lord Merrick stumbled backward, his composure shattering. What is this? What are you? Seren rose to her feet, and she was no longer the frightened healer who had walked through those doors. Darkness coiled around her like living armor. Her eyes had become pools of absolute black. And when she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to shake the very foundations of the castle. I am the void touched, she intoned. I am the shadow between heartbeats. I am the darkness that your bloodline should have feared. The guards rushed toward her. The shadows met them. It was not a battle. It was a reckoning. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, draining life force, stopping hearts, reducing proud warriors to empty husks that crumpled to the floor. The children screamed, but the shadows curved around them, leaving them untouched, recognizing innocence and sparing it. Ravenna shifted to wolf form, lunging at Seren with fangs bared. A single tendril caught her mid-leap, lifting her into the air, holding her suspended as darkness crawled across her fur. You tried to murder me, Seren said softly. You tried to steal the man I love. You tried to kill my children before they were even born. Ravenna struggled against the shadows, her eyes wild with terror. But I am not going to kill you. Seren released her, letting her fall in a heap on the cold stone floor. You are going to live. You are going to stand before the assembled packs and confess every crime your family has committed. And you are going to spend the rest of your existence knowing that the common-born servant you despised is the reason you still draw breath." Ravenna whimpered, curling into a ball. Lord Merrick made a desperate lunge for the nearest child. He never reached his target. A massive black wolf crashed through the side entrance, moving with speed that defied physics. Calder's jaws closed around the Lord's arm, the same arm that had reached for an innocent life, and with a savage twist, he tore it from the socket. Lord Merrick's scream echoed through the hall. More wolves poured in behind their king, Corvin, the 6 who had followed them through the catacombs. And behind them, pouring through every entrance, came the wolves, who had remained loyal to Calder through the chaos of the coup. The remaining Marek forces saw the tide turning and threw down their weapons. Seren felt the darkness receding, the void touch retreating back beneath her skin as the threat subsided. Exhaustion crashed over her in waves, and she would have collapsed if strong arms had not caught her. Calder, shifted back to human form, pulled her against his chest. "You impossible woman," he breathed. "You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman." "The children," she managed. "Safe, all of them safe, because of you." The smallest boy, the one who had been held aloft and threatened, broke free from the huddle and ran toward them. He wrapped his tiny arms around Seren's legs, burying his face against her skirts. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, lady." Seren sank down to his level, gathering him into her arms despite her trembling limbs. "You are safe now," she promised. "No one will hurt you again." Over the boy's head, she met Calder's eyes. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before: awe, devotion, and something that ran deeper than either: recognition of an equal. When the hall was secured and Lord Merrick's wounds had been bound for his eventual trial, Calder turned to address the wolves who had gathered. "The Merricks conspired against the crown," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner. "They poisoned their king. They manipulated the sacred ceremony of the choosing. They attempted to murder the true Queen of Arendor and the heirs she carries." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. "But their conspiracy has failed. Not because of my strength, but because of hers." Calder extended his hand toward Seren. "This woman, who your laws would have dismissed as a common-born servant, has saved your children, defeated your enemies, and proven herself more worthy of a crown than any noble bloodline." He pulled her to his side. "I ask you now, as your king, to witness what I should have declared months ago. Seren is my true mate. The bond between us was forged by fate itself. And tonight, in the presence of our people and our ancestors, I will complete that bond and make her your queen." The hall fell silent. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a wolf began to howl. Others joined. One voice became 10. 10 became 100, until the great hall shook with the sound of the pack accepting their new queen. Calder took Seren's hand and led her to the dais. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. "No," she admitted. "But I am going to do it anyway." He smiled, and in that smile she saw their entire future. Then he tilted his head, baring his throat to her in the ancient gesture of submission. "Claim me," he said. "Make me yours completely." Seren's wolf rose within her. Not the terrifying void touch, but something older, something that had slumbered in her bloodline for generations, waiting for this moment to awaken. She felt her body begin to shift. The transformation was unlike anything she had experienced before. Not the forced change of battle, but a willing surrender to the animal within. Bones reformed, muscles reconfigured. Fur the color of moonlit snow erupted across her skin. When it was complete, a silver-white wolf stood before the assembled pack, and that wolf stepped forward, pressed her muzzle to Calder's offered throat, and bit down. The bond exploded between them. Seren felt Calder's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret fear and hidden hope. They became one creature with two bodies, one soul with two hearts, one love that transcended flesh and blood and time itself. When she released him and shifted back to human form, she was weeping. So was he. "My queen," Calder breathed, pulling her into his arms. "My king," she answered. And around them, the wolves of Arendor howled their celebration to the stars. In the months that followed, Arendor healed. The Merricks faced judgment before the assembled packs, their crimes laid bare for all to witness. Lord Aldrich was executed at dawn, his final moments spent begging for a mercy he had never shown to others. Ravenna, true to Seren's word, was stripped of her name and exiled to the frozen wastes beyond the northern border, condemned to live out her days as the nothing she had once called another. The nobles who had conspired with House Merrick were given a choice: confess and accept exile, or face the king's justice. Most chose confession. The few who did not learned that Calder's mercy had limits. But justice was not the only story that spring. The kingdom watched in wonder as their new queen grew heavy with the airs she carried. Seren had worried, at first, that the people would never accept a common-born woman on the throne. That whispers would follow her. That resentment would fester. Instead, she found something she had never expected: love. The people adored her. They came from every corner of the realm to catch a glimpse of the woman who had faced down assassins, saved their children, and won their king's heart. They brought gifts for the babies. They offered blessings in the old tongue. They looked at her with hope in their eyes, as if her presence on the throne meant that anyone could rise above their circumstances. "You have given them something precious," Calder told her one evening as they watched the sunset from their chamber balcony. "You have given them the belief that fate rewards courage and kindness, not just blood and power." "I have given them a target," Seren replied, only half joking. "Any noble family with ambitions will see me as an obstacle to be removed." "Let them try." Calder's arms tightened around her. "Let anyone try. I will tear them apart with my bare hands." So protective. Always. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You are my heart, Seren. My home. I spent 5 days believing I had lost you forever. I will spend the rest of my existence ensuring that never happens again." She turned in his arms, tilting her face up to his. "I love you," she said simply. The words still felt new, even after everything. They had whispered them in the darkness, murmured them in moments of passion, and shouted them across battlefields and through castle walls. But each time felt like the first. "And I love you." Calder kissed her softly. More than words can express, more than forever can contain. A sharp kick from within her belly interrupted the moment. Seren laughed, pressing her hand to the spot where their children were making their presence known. "They are restless tonight. They are eager to meet the world." Calder placed his hand over hers. "I cannot blame them. They have quite an introduction awaiting them." An introduction to what? A kingdom still recovering from civil war? A throne built on centuries of bloodshed? A mother who can barely control her own power? An introduction to a family that will love them fiercely. Calder's voice was soft but certain. A mother who walked through fire to protect them before they were even born. A father who would burn the world to keep them safe. That is what awaits them, Seren. That is the legacy we will give them. She felt tears prick at her eyes. "I used to dream about having a family," she whispered. "When I was a child in the Healers Guild, alone and unwanted, I used to imagine what it would feel like to belong to someone, to be loved without conditions or qualifications. And now? Now I have more than I ever dared to dream." She met his gaze. "I have you. I have them. I have a purpose and a place in this world. Everything I lost, everything I suffered, it led me here. to this moment, to this life. No regrets? Only one. Seren smiled through her tears. That I wasted so much time being afraid, that I nearly let fear steal everything that mattered. Fear did not steal anything, Calder said firmly. It tested you, and you emerged stronger than anyone imagined possible. A sharp pain lanced through her belly. Seren gasped, her hand flying to the spot. Calder's expression shifted instantly to alarm. Seren, I think, she managed, that our heirs have decided they do not want to wait any longer. The night that followed was long and difficult. Seren labored for hours, her body working to bring new life into the world while Calder paced outside the chamber like a caged wolf. The healers moved with quiet efficiency, their faces calm despite the stakes. Finally, as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, a cry split the air. Then another. Calder burst through the door before anyone could stop him, his eyes wild, his heart pounding. He stumbled to a halt at the sight before him. Seren lay exhausted but radiant in their bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face glowing with a joy that transcended physical limits. And in her arms, two tiny bundles squirmed and wailed. A boy and a girl, the midwife announced, stepping aside to let the king approach. Both healthy, both strong. Calder fell to his knees beside the bed, his hands trembling as he reached toward his children. May I? Seren smiled and transferred the boy into his arms. He was so small, so impossibly fragile. Dark hair, like Calder's. But when his eyes opened, they held a hint of silver that spoke of his mother's power. The girl remained in Seren's arms, her tiny fist wrapped around her mother's finger. Her coloring was lighter, promising the moonlit fur of her mother's wolf form. They are perfect, Calder breathed. They are ours. Seren watched him cradle their son with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Our family, our future. What shall we name them? Seren had thought about this for months, had considered and rejected dozens of possibilities. But now, looking at her children for the first time, the answer seemed obvious. The boy should be called Orin, she said softly. It means golden light. He will carry his father's strength and his mother's hope. Orin, Calder repeated, testing the name. I like it. And our daughter? Celeste. For the stars that guided us through the darkness. Seren pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead. She will be fierce and beautiful and unstoppable. Like her mother. Like both of us. Calder shifted to sit beside her on the bed, their children cradled between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply existed in the perfection of the moment. Two souls made whole by the family they had created. I never thought I would have this, Calder finally said. When I was young, I was taught that kings do not marry for love. That duty comes before the heart. That the throne demands sacrifices. And now? Now I know that love is the greatest strength a king can possess. That the heart does not weaken duty. It gives duty meaning. He met her eyes. You taught me that, Seren. You and these children. You have made me better than I ever could have been alone. We have made each other better. She leaned her head against his shoulder. That is what true mates do. Outside their window, the wolves of Arendor lifted their voices in celebration. The howls carried across the kingdom, spreading the news that the royal heirs had arrived. A new chapter had begun. In the years that followed, the story of Seren and Calder became legend. They told it in villages and castles alike. The tale of the servant girl who captured a king's heart, the mate who was stolen by poison and lies, the woman who walked through darkness and emerged as a queen. Children grew up hearing of her courage. Young wolves dreamed of bonds as powerful as the one she shared with her king. And whenever anyone asked Seren what advice she would give to those facing impossible circumstances, she always answered the same way. Love fiercely, trust completely, and never, ever let fear make your choices for you. She had learned those lessons through fire and shadow, through loss and triumph. And she carried them with her every day as she ruled beside her mate, raised her children, and shaped a kingdom that would endure for generations. They had found each other when all seemed lost. They had survived betrayal, separation, and death itself. And they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.